This is Jonathan Agger, Fifth Pro Boxing Fans, joined by Dan Rafael, Fight Freaks Unite, and the Big Fight Weekend podcast, and of course his YouTube channel with Big Fight Weekend. Dan, how's everything going with that, first of all?
Everything is going good, Jonathan. I see you have survived the epic Jake Paul Anthony Joshua event.
Well, yeah, epic. In terms of the event, fight not so much. But what did you think heading into the fight, and did anything surprise you how it turned out?
I mean, I've talked about it a lot going into the fight. Nothing surprised me other than the fact that it lasted 6 rounds instead of like 2 or 3 rounds. I figured that Anthony Joshua was absolutely going to knock him out. I didn't think there was ever any particular avenue to victory for Jake Paul. There was no way in my mind he could possibly outbox Anthony Joshua. I didn't think he'd be able to handle the power, and Anthony Joshua at some point is going to land his right hand. And so it didn't surprise me at all. What I won't say, I guess it didn't shock me, but it kind of disappointed me. Whereas I didn't expect Jake Paul to go in there and just recklessly go forward and try to mix it up with Anthony Joshua. That would be like immediate suicide. That would be like running into a jet plane propeller on purpose. But there's a fine line between being defensive minded and using your ability to move and your speed and things like that, than like literally fleeing and just running around the ring like you're in a cartoon. And that's what he basically resorted to for the first 4 rounds. I mean, I guess it was effective because he stayed upright, other than when he was flopping down on the canvas. But no, nothing really surprised me. Jake got the knockout that everybody expected, and it was a pretty impressive knockout when he finally got it. It just took him longer than it probably should have to get there.
Why do you think it took him so long? It seemed at times that he wasn't throwing his right hand as much. Was it just the fact, like you said, Jake was on the back foot? It was difficult to pin him down, or do you think Joshua should have and could have finished this way earlier?
I mean, he probably could have finished it a little bit earlier. I mean, I'm willing to cut him a little bit of slack because we look at it from the standpoint of, okay, he's a physically much more imposing figure, a much better fighter, a much heavier puncher, a much more experienced fighter. This is an Olympic gold medal winner. This is a two-time unified heavyweight champion going up against what is basically still a novice professional in Jake Paul, who, by the way, is fighting generally in the 200-pound weight class, and Anthony Joshua was a chiseled 250 in most of his fights or thereabouts. So from that standpoint, he had all the physical advantages as well as all the experience and skills advantages. So why couldn't he do it earlier? Because it's hard to catch up with a guy when he's just going to run around and never try to even take a front step whatsoever. So that made it difficult. And the other part of it that I have thought about, rather than being overly critical of Joshua, like I look at the fact that it may not resonate with you or me or somebody just watching, but in his mind, he knows he's off a 15-month layoff. So, it's fair to whoever you're fighting. You could be fighting Tyson Fury, you could be fighting Jake Paul, to give the guy, he's going to need a minute or two or three or whatever just to sort of feel comfortable again in a real fight. That's the first thing after the layoff. Second thing is his last fight. It's not just he's coming off the 15-month layoff. In his last fight, and this is definitely in his mind because every boxer I've ever interviewed or talked to over my extensive career coming off of a loss remembers what happened, especially when it was a knockout. And Anthony Joshua didn't just suffer a loss in his most recent fight prior to the Jake Paul fight. He suffered a cataclysmic devastation of a knockout against Daniel Dubois. Not just a regular stoppage, not just, I got clipped and I got knocked down, or a ref stopped or I got cut or whatever. This was an abusive, bounce you off the canvas 4 times, knock you the fuck out cold. And that's got to be in his mind after getting back in the ring for the first time in 15 months. Then you add in the fact that he's coming off an elbow surgery, which granted he went through a rehab for, but you still never know until you're in there throwing the real punches in a real fight. And on top of that, he's with a new trainer for the first time. That's a lot of stuff to deal with, besides just a regular, preparation for a fight. So I'll cut him some slack for that, why he couldn't get him out of there a little bit earlier. And at the end of the day, in my mind, he's going to get him out of there in like about 2 rounds. Okay, so it went 6, and his opponent spent 4 of those rounds running around like his life depended on it, or like just stole something from a liquor store. So, as the kids say, Jonathan, it is what it is.
Jake Paul, people said, was going to fold as soon as the first right hand landed. He kept getting up, showed immense bravery. Were you impressed by the heart he showed, undoubtedly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be. I mean, look, there are many things that you can criticize Jake Paul about, and that's fair. But if you're going to do that, you also have to be fair and give the man his credit and tip my hat to him,
Mm.
for showing the balls that he did, for taking the fight in the first place, for not folding as soon as he got cracked with the right hand. There was one moment where he did get hit and he kind of buckled, and he had a look on his face like, oh shit, this is a real fight now. But he still stayed on his feet. And even like you said, when he got knocked down 4 times in all, he still got up. I mean, obviously the final knockdown, he didn't get up to beat the count, but he was on his rear end. He wasn't flat on his back out cold. And that was a heavy duty right hand, the last one that landed. I think that's the one that probably broke his jaw. And, so yeah, absolutely, I give him credit. I mean, on the one hand, the first 4 rounds were unwatchable, and that was largely because of Jake's decision to fight in the manner that he did. But by the time he got to round number 5, I felt like he's getting a little tired. As he said in his post-fight interview, with the fact every time they would clinch, and he initiated most of those clinches, Anthony Joshua was outweighing him by about 30 pounds, is leaning on him, is a big, strong man, and that's going to sap you from energy. So he couldn't continue to be on his bicycle for all 8 rounds. And when Anthony Joshua finally caught up to him and landed some of those punches, it was going to be over and out. It was just a matter of, how quickly, 1 punch, 2 punch, 3 punch. But it turned out 2 knockdowns in round 5, another knockdown in round 6, and then the big knockout right hand later in the 6th round. So, but yeah, absolutely, I give credit to Jake for, for being, a guy that you gave him. He tried. We may not have liked the style that he tried early on, but at the end of the day, he got up off the deck, and you got to tip your hat to him for showing the balls.
You said about, Joshua having to sort of overcome mental demons from the Dubois loss. Given, Jake was down 4 times, broken jaw, went to hospital. Is this, do you feel like going to be a difficult one for him to get over?
I mean, I think maybe less so than Joshua. And the reason I say that is because when Joshua fought Dubois, he's a heavy favorite in that fight. He's supposed to win. He's supposed to knock Dubois out. He's supposed to do it and regain the IBF title. But in the case of Jake Paul, even though he got knocked out and it didn't obviously go his way, and he got bounced off the canvas like 4 times, for him, in many ways, it's a win, because most people thought he was going to get erased in 1 or 2 rounds. He went 6, and he hung in there with the former 2-time heavyweight champion, who is a much bigger man. Remember, Jake has only had about 5 years of experience. He didn't have, or 6 years of experience, whatever it's been, but he never had an amateur background. And that there's something to be said for that he could even hang in, even if he lost every round on the scorecards, and he got knocked down 4 times. So from that standpoint, he was not competitive. But the mere fact that he was still standing into the 6th round, I think he can take that as a positive. That if I could make it 6 rounds with Anthony Joshua, I could probably go 6 rounds with just about anybody, or longer even. And I mean, not to say that he's going to win, but I mean, I guess from a mental standpoint, I don't think it's going to be massively detrimental, because he's like, look, I just fought the 2-time heavyweight champion. I got my ass kicked. But if he fights another so-called real fighter, but somebody that's not at the level of an Anthony Joshua, of which he can find many of them, particularly if he's back down in his more natural cruiserweight division, maybe he can make a go of it against real fighters. He's going to need a rest, obviously. I know he was having, he's in the hospital getting his jaw dealt with. Take a rest, and we'll see what he does next.
As for Joshua, there's been rumors, sort of whispers this week about him fighting a kickboxing champion, Rico. I apologize, I can't remember the last name. I'm not really familiar with him. But Eddie Hearn was asked in a press conference, and he didn't exactly rule it out completely. Are you hearing anything behind the scenes about what could be next?
I mean, I hadn't heard that name specifically, but what's the general scuttlebutt, if you will, that I've heard from a few different people is that the plan is for him to come back in the February timeframe, along with Tyson Fury, somewhere in the same area, and they're going to both fight basically nobodies. I'm not sure what the purpose of that is. I mean, Anthony just had the so-called tune-up on last night, and okay, fair for Fury to get a so-called tune-up. He's been out for a year and coming off of a loss as well. But when you get to this position, and of course they would do those fights, and if they're the winners, then they would move on, and sometime, I guess, in the later in the year, would fight each other in the long-awaited showdown. But when you get to the point where these guys are in their careers, both in terms of the wear and tear as well as the age, like anytime you step in the ring, you're putting yourself in harm's way. I don't care who you're fighting. I mean, unless it's a Jake Paul level opponent, that much smaller, that much less experienced, that much less skilled. But if you put him in with even like a halfway decent heavyweight, you just never know. Now, if what you're saying is they're going to put him in with a kickboxer that's not a boxing person, that sounds like, a quote unquote soft touch. But like, what's the point? Like, there's no fan demand for that kind of fight. Obviously, the guys want to get paid, but you know what? If you really want to get paid, just increase their purse for when they fight each other, for crying out loud. I mean, we are, and all due respect to Turki Al-Sheikh and to everybody involved in this event, if it should happen between Joshua and Fury, they all should have learned their fucking lesson when they finally were able to make the deal for Joshua to fight Deontay Wilder, but they insisted on these tune-up fights. And what happened? Anthony Joshua did his job, and Deontay Wilder got beat, and the fight went down the toilet. So it would be a real shame if we're at the position where you finally, after years and years and years of trying to make Fury and Joshua, and something might happen to them in the so-called tune-up fights that would then wreck the plans for a showdown that is not 100% past its sell-by date, even though it's edging there. But people still want to see it. And for the sake, as I've said 1,000 times, for the sake of writing the history of this era of heavyweight boxing, that fight has to happen. And I would hate to see them fuck it up by doing something silly and losing or getting injured or whatever in some kind of tune-up situation early next year.
Lastly, Dan, the speculation, I believe they've confirmed they're in talks for a fight between Deontay Wilder and Oleksandr Usyk. How far? I think Sergey Lapin said to me yesterday they're looking at potentially June. How far are they in negotiations from what you're hearing?
Oh, they're definitely in negotiations. I mean, that is a fight that has absolutely got a good chance to happen. I keep in touch with the Deontay Wilder team on a regular basis. I talked to them actually just the other day about that. And the thing is, yes, they would love to get the shot against Usyk for the title, but they also have a possibility, and there's been a back and forth dialogue about doing a fight between Deontay Wilder and Derek Chisora. And right now it's coming down to, I guess, of course, if you're Deontay Wilder, you want to fight for the heavyweight championship. But any fight could be his last fight. Any fight could be Usyk's last fight. Any fight could be Chisora's last fight. They want to make sure that the deal is right, however their perspective is on the financial elements or the other things that go surrounding any kind of deal you make. So, you'd think automatically, let's take the Usyk fight because we get a shot at the title. But the money is also highly significant. So they have both of those options on the table. And I was told they'll make a decision before the end of this year. So sometime, we're a few days from Christmas. A lot of people will be taking a break, but I got to figure over that holiday that those teams will be working the phones and the emails and all to figure out what they're going to do. But absolutely, those are real discussions. If he does fight Usyk, that fight, I am told, will take place in the United States, which is a place where obviously Deontay has most of his fans, but Usyk has not fought here for several years. And it would be great to have him back in America. I would, if I had my way, I would love it for that fight to happen in the greater Washington, D.C. area where I live. And I say that because I didn't know this until a few years ago when Top Rank brought a card to the Washington, D.C. area. And it was sort of like, why are you bringing that card here? And it was a card that involved Lomachenko in the main event. Alexander Usyk was on the card. They had Alexander Vodzik on the card, all three Ukrainian fighters. And as I came to find out, the greater Washington, D.C. area, Maryland and Northern Virginia, where I live, is one of the largest Ukrainian communities in the world other than Ukraine and maybe New York City. So, and it was proof because when I showed up at the arena that night, it was, it wasn't a huge arena, but it was sold out. And it was basically all Ukrainian folks from this region that went to support those Ukrainian fighters. So, and also Washington, D.C. is a gigantic Black community. And they would absolutely, that boxing community would turn out to support Deontay Wilder. I think they can make a really big event in the Washington, D.C. area for that as a heavyweight title fight. But, that's just me, saying that based on my geography. But still, they could do that in New York City. They could do it in Las Vegas, wherever they would do it. I would think they would have a nice crowd. And then when you get to the actual fight, what are Usyk's chances or what are Wilder's chances? Look, Deontay has had a heck of a career, and he's been a fun fighter to watch and has a huge knockout punch, obviously. But he seems to have seen better days to me. Usyk is still fighting at a high level. It feels to me like, as long as he stays away from that big right-hand bomb, which he hasn't landed Deontay in quite a while, that Usyk could probably take care of business. But I understand why he wants to fight, right? I mean, the biggest names of the era besides himself are Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, and Deontay Wilder. Well, he already beat Tyson Fury twice, and he already beat Anthony Joshua twice. The only guy among the big guys, the big names he didn't fight is Deontay Wilder, who was a former champion, and I get it.
Just finally, I believe Matchroom have a hold on MGM for March 28th. Do you expect this Boots Ortiz fight to happen?
That's a very good question. I've grown more skeptical, but I'm hopeful that they'll be able to pull pull the body from the fire, so to speak. I mean, right now, everything, and I've talked to both sides about this. My understanding is that when it comes to the Matchroom and Boots Ennis, they're good to go. Eddie has been saying that even, for the last month, probably since Boots' last fight. Discussions between Matchroom and Golden Boy, I don't think they have like a signed contract necessarily, but they are definitely on the same page. They understand the parameters, how they're going to do it, what they're going to do, where they're going to do it, all that business. And of course, DAZN, which is the broadcaster for both Golden Boy and for Matchroom, is heavily involved. And I think they've laid out what their perspective is. The issue in making the match is strictly down between Eric Gomez and Oscar De La Hoya from Golden Boy and Rick Meridian, who is the manager for Vergil Ortiz. And they're fighting a bloody war in the boardroom over the money for that fight. And if they can't get it worked out, the fight's not going to happen. And Rick has taken a scorched earth attitude about it. And Oscar and Eric are not going to lay down about it. And they're bickering back and forth like cats and dogs. And hopefully that's just the sort of making of the sausage, and they'll get their shit together and get it done. But I know both of them. I know Eric and Oscar and Rick really well. And they're good at what they do, but they're very, very stubborn people as well. And so sometimes that gets in the way of actually getting a deal done. But Rick's doing his job as the manager of Vergil Ortiz and fighting for every dollar for what people say is such a huge fight. Mm-hmm. And Eric and Oscar and DAZN are fighting to make sure that they get it in what they believe is an appropriate amount of money for what their expectations are for the potential of either a pay-per-view, but also as a way to lure people to purchase the new upgraded level of DAZN subscriptions, which is supposed to be, they call it, the ultimate package, where you get all the pay-per-views as part of a greater yearly or monthly fee. So let's see. Maybe our Christmas present will be that they beat each over the head enough and they finally come to a deal. But I say it could go either way.
So as far as you understand, the issue isn't between Golden Boy and Matchroom at this point.
That is correct. The issue is strictly between the Golden Boy executives and the manager for Vergil Ortiz. And unless they come to an agreement on what the financial package is, they're just not going to be a fight.
Well, we'll wait and see if that comes to fruition. danrafael.substack.com to see your report from last night, and Big Fight Weekend podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and I'm sure you'll have your end of year awards going out in the next couple of days, so stay tuned for that, right?
I don't know about the next couple of days, but hopefully before the end of the year and maybe lapsing over into the beginning of the year. And what happens now, Jonathan, is that these fights, they go all the way now up to the end of the year. It used to be, when I first started doing this, we'd get to this particular weekend, the weekend before Christmas, and there was literally nothing for the rest of the year, even maybe into the first week of January. But now we still got some shows remaining. Obviously, there's a very significant show with Inoue coming up next week. So, but I'll get cracking on that. And as always, I'll be producing, the fighter of the year, the knockout of the year, the prospect of the year, all that kind of business.
Links in the description to check out Dan's stuff. Dan, appreciate your time. And if I don't speak to you before, Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Jonathan. Have a great trip back to the UK, my man.